George Fickett is a lifelong resident of Prince George. He worked for Chesterfield for 45 years. He's been involved in battlefield preservation for 50 years, and he is the president of the Petersburg Battlefield Foundation. He's on 5 different boards and commissions. Today he's going to talk about the Bermuda 100 campaign and the preservation of it. So let's all welcome George Fickett.
I'm trying to learn a new computer over here, so at the same time I'm going to push the wrong button. Hope not. Preservation, can everybody hear me fine? Preservation has been going on in Chesterfield County for longer than just me. It goes back to 1888, basically right after the Civil War. So we're going to start at that point. Supposed to move.
Should be the arrow.
Try the page down.
I don't want to overshoot. There we go. First actual preservation was by John Thompson Brown. He was the captain of the battery at Parker's Battery during the Civil War in Bermuda 100. What he did after the war was he bought 3 acres around the original battery site, and the soldiers from the battery would do annual reunions at the battery site, which eventually included the 15th and 17th Virginia Infantry who fought on both sides of it. So this was really the first purchase of preservation in Chesterfield County. Okay, this out of focus. I don't know what's going on. There we go. I'm at. Okay, okay, I just going in the dark. Okay, the first preservation to be done was Parker's Battery. When John Thompson Brown passed away, his wife sold the property to the Richmond Battlefield Parks Commission. And what this was formed in the 1920s by Douglas Southall Freeman and his group of friends. So this was one of the first parcels they bought to preserve the sites that were going to be in the future to the Richmond National Battlefield. And they would continue. Then, one of the other properties, since Douglas Southall Freeman and his group had started buying up land on the north side of the James River, on the eastern side of Richmond, where 7 Days Battle was fought, and the actions in Fort Harrison area in 1864. So they also purchased the site of Jury's Bluff. So they were acquiring properties and then basically built a road to connect all these properties after the war in the early 1920s. And this shows the deed and all that went with the property in what year? 1929, so that's when that was purchased. There we go. Richmond Battlefield Parks Corporation donates the battlefield land to the state of Virginia under the Virginia Conservation Commission. They were the forerunner of Virginia State Parks. So all of the land that Douglas Southall Freeman and the corporation acquired was transferred to the state of Virginia as state parks. Don't actually have a deed. I never found a deed on when that was done. In 1936, Richmond National Battlefield Park was created, and what people don't realize is that on the south of the James, north of the Appomattox, there were plans for the Bermuda 100 campaign battlefield area of Chesterfield County. And what you'll notice is it's bounded on the north by the James River, bounded on the south by the Appomattox. And if you know where Interstate 295 is on the east and 95 is on the west, all of that land just about would have been a national park in 1937. And so the preparations for this park unit were stopped because there was a little incident called World War II, and the Park Service had to dedicate their efforts for not preserving land at that point, but to help support the war effort at the end of the war. So the proposed 1937 park of Bermuda 100 never happened. In 1936, the Virginia State Parks Commission, what was known as the Conservation Commission, transferred all of their Civil War battlefield land north of on the north side of James and the south side of James to the National Park Service. So what happened was there were two national parks created in Chesterfield County: Parker's Battery, which was at that time still only 3 acres, and then the site of Drury's Bluff at Fort Darling on the James River. So these were now national park sites. So instead of having this whole area of Bermuda 100 as a national park site, again, they only had 2 acres, but 3 acres at Parker's Battery and the site of around 20 acres at Drury's Bluff. So what was to be conserved never was developed and saved as national park property. Oops.
Hey, George,
Yes.
could you explain what's on the map to some of the folks, because it's not quite north-south. It might be confusing.
Okay. On that. What's a touchy button? All right, to give you some idea of the size of this park, this is the north side over here. This is Henrico County. Appomattox River, Prince George County to the right. Interstate 95 today kind of runs right down through here. 295 runs just about along here. So that kind of gives you the area of, and Henricus Park today is located right up here. So that kind of gives you the realm of the area that we're talking about. It's a large tract of land that would have been national park. I believe it was 1955, they decided to expand Parker's Battery. So the National Park Service acquires additional land around Parker's Battery, and I believe it was somewhere around an additional 10 acres, 10 to 20 acres that they acquired. So it expanded that park because it was too small. So that at that point, battlefield preservation stopped. There was no more acquirement of land up until I became an employee of Chesterfield County. Pretty self-explanatory there. I was hired by the county in 1971. My job was to update the county tax maps, so I was involved with all the land transfers in the county. I also had to do, back in the early 1970s, the county still had rural route and box numbers. So you remember that some of you people out there that still know my parents' box route 329 Prince George. So, and it changed to 4421 Prince George Drive. So this is what I was doing in Chesterfield County. I was driving around the county, locating houses, put them on a map, bring them back to our grid system, and establish all the new addresses in Chesterfield County. So while driving around in the eastern part of the county, I started noticing all these earthworks other than Parker's Battery, which I knew while I was in high school. So I started to look for more information. In the early 80s, there was not a lot written about Bermuda 100 and the Civil War. You had the official records, and then you also had battles and leaders of the Civil War, and that's pretty much all you had that told you anything about what happened in Bermuda 100. So starting on preservation, it was very difficult to find information. I also started plotting these earthworks on the county paper maps that we were using at the time, and then as we went to digital in 1992, I transferred all that information to our digital system, unbeknownst to the county. I had a private layer in there that they didn't know about it. It's good to have $5 million in computer equipment to play with. So in 1985, this is what existed at that time. You had Drury's Bluff, Fort Darling. You had Parker's Battery down here in the middle of the county. You had Fort Stevens that the county had just purchased for a water tower. And that was my first efforts before 1985 to preserve that site silently, because I did not know what my standings would be as a county employee, conflict of interest. So I didn't know it, so I stayed under the table on that one. And then the county bought Dog Park, which there are still remains of Union earthworks in the park. And if you know where the horseshoe area is, where the playgrounds are located now, there used to be a series of 12 gun emplacements across that property. I was laying out a football field on the park and saw the guy with a bulldozer. By the time I got there, there was only one battery left. And I finally stopped him and told him not to bulldoze down. So but down in the park itself, there are earthworks along Ashton Creek and along the Appomattox River. So the situation is 4 parks with Civil War sites, and that's it. Again, this is the one at Dog Park I was explaining. If you look at the red lines, those are the Union fortifications that were built in 1864. And they go down on the river, and they also go through the park. Yeah, this is the horseshoe area. I told you where the batteries went across, and that's the one that's left out of that park. We were able to save that, and I was able to keep the county from destroying any of the other earthworks inside the park area. In the early 1980s, around 1985, I had 3 Civil War sites that I found that I was not in conflict of interest with the county because I did not approve anything that to be developed in the county. So I was able to talk to developers and do some sites. There were 3 sites under development all at the same time. And I was able to talk to all of them and explain the importance of the sites on that property. And so Air Products over here on this side donated this part. Well, this is Fort Stevens. This is the one we saved in the late 70s when we did it. You can see the earthworks on the property. Water tower was going to go right there. So we were able to persuade them to relocate the water tower, and it cost the county an extra $250,000 to do it. But then we had enough input to persuade the board to move the water tower and utilities. Okay, after Fort Stevens, things started really happening in the development of the eastern end of the county. Battery Dazzler, Fort Weed, and the Hellline Park were the 3 that were up for endangerment at that time. You saw Fort Stevens was saved. All 3 were all in snail mail back then. We didn't have computers in 1985, so everything was done by mail. It took 6 to 12 years to save each one of those sites. You have to be very patient in preservation and keep pushing, and don't take no for an answer. This is one of the first sites. It's in off of Woods Edge Road. It's in, shoot, I forgot the subdivision's name, it's been so long. But Mr. Hill, Forest Hill, was the developer, and I was able to persuade him to save that site. Luckily, because in 1987, 2 books were published on the Bermuda Hunter campaign, and I had additional information more detailed of what occurred in Bermuda Hunter during that May period, May of 1864 to June of 1865. He agreed to relocate a road. The road you see on the right was proposed to be straight, to go across right through the middle of those earthworks and cut them down and use them as fill. So I was able to persuade him to save them, and he goes, "What do I do with the site now?" And I asked him to donate it to the county as a park, and he did, with a couple of conditions, which was resolved. And you can see from 1985 to 1991, it took 6 years to save that site. And the photograph here, it got put in the Associated Press and went to the Washington Post in D.C. It was a local article. And 2 years later, 1987, we received Take Pride in America awards from the National Park Service, the developer and myself. Here is Battery Dancer. That was another site. It's extremely rare to actually have a photograph of what you're saving. The earthwork here is still there today. It's got a bridge deck over top of it so you can look at it today. You can see it's a linear parcel like a flag, but the battery was saved, and the Air Products of Pennsylvania donated its site at no cost. Now that's an important thing. If you see, watch these yellow ones and see what it says: donated, purchased, whatever. That's going to be important at the end of this talk. But we did save that one, and it didn't get saved until 1992. And when the county got the deed. Okay. In October of 1989, Blue and Gray magazine came out with an article, and they donated 500 copies of the magazine for us to sell to help raise money for a driving tour. And that money was purchased or used, and the logo you see there today was our original tour signs of the Bermuda Hunter campaign, which consisted of about 12 signs and 58 miles of driving in a 12-mile area to go to all these sites. Some of these sites were still not safe, but you could drive by and see them from the road. The third site that was involved in this process was Fort Weed, 1 acre fort, 200 feet square. It was owned eventually by multiple landowners. The land kept getting transferred and had to start negotiating with a new person. So this one took 12 years to get saved and finally donated. And you will know that the owner of the property, the last owner, was Sonny Kern and George Emerson as partners. And Mr. Emerson, he didn't want to donate the site. He wanted to build a house on it. Mr. Curran said, "There's a fort there. It's not a big deal. Give it to him." And Mr. Emerson goes, and Emerson and I are really good friends, believe it or not. But at this time, he was a typical developer. And he said, "I've grown up on that property around there. I've covered all those woods. There's not a fort out there. But if there is one, I'll give it to him." Big mistake on his part. So it was a jungle. You had to get there off the railroad tracks that run parallel to it. And we had survey ribbons, so we had a way to get in and get out. Because you get lost in there and get turned around. So we took him in there, and he looked at me and said, "I swear, I never knew that fort was there." So we walked back out, and next thing we work out a deal, and from between 1985 is when I started on that. After 3 owners, we finally got it in 1997 as a county park. You notice there's actually a photograph of Fort Weed that was published in the official records of the Civil War in 1867. Okay, Ware Bottom Church. This was another site that I had been trying to save over a period of time. Started talks early in the 1980s. It was Courtney Wells and Buddy Miles were owners of the property. They were part of that Fort Weed site that we tried to save. This is the same, in the same area, close to Parker's Battery. Has 1,200 feet of unbroken earthworks on it. And after long negotiations, they agreed to donate half the value of the property as a match to an American Battlefield Protection Program grant. So the property was valued at $350,000. Since I had the match, all I had to do was fill out an application form through the American Battlefield Protection Program, which is run by the National Park Service, and I should get the money. Well, it didn't happen that way. Park Service notified Richmond Battlefield, is anybody in Chesterfield County trying to save a Civil War site? And they went, well, the only person we know is me. So they called me, and they go, Park Service in Washington called me and goes, they said your application was unique. Because they wouldn't give me any information. I didn't know how to fill out a proper form or whatever because I couldn't find one. And they said, well, we have 4 criteria. You know what they are, just list them. And so, okay, I did. I sent it back. That's what the unique part was, because it was 2 typewritten pages. One was the criteria, the second one was the information of attachments that I had sent. It took from 2003 to 2014 to close on that property with the National Park Service. Mainly because I didn't know what I was doing, and they were willing enough to hang in there with me, and we worked through the process, and we finally got the land donated to Chesterfield County. And now it is a park. So that was the first time I had to ask for money.
George,
Yes?
at Ware Bottom, whatever happened to the graveyard there?
I will get there. It's in the process, but I will do that as we go. All right, here is another section of land in development. This group that owned this land was in Virginia Beach, and they were going to develop it into a subdivision. We started in 2005. We had issues that the builder had entered proffers, and we persuaded him to offer the county a proffer of land versus dollars to get his subdivision developed. It's 12 acres. In the process of researching that site, we found out that Sergeant James Ingram of the 97th Pennsylvania Infantry had received the Medal of Honor on that property in that area in front of those earthworks. So he had to have come out of them, and what he did is he spent the whole day administering ammunition to all of the guys on the picket line under fire for the whole day, exposing himself in battle. So that's how we got that. And so we went to the county, asked them to have a proffer, and then I got up and spoke and said a Medal of Honor winner was located at that site. They didn't have much idea except to accept the proffer, because actually the land was worth more in value than the proffer would have been. So we acquired this site through a proffer. Well, the Chesterfield Historical Society Civil War Site Committee decided we would do a brochure or a driving tour of the county. So we went and created the document and published it, and we're getting ready to reorder prints because we're out now. We're getting ready to be out. But it gives you over a 58 plus mile driving tour of Chesterfield County of all the Civil War sites that we have. We've got a couple of new sites since that's been published. I was also, while this is going on, I was a reenactor. I did Union and Confederate. And if you notice this guy shooting the musket flame there in the photograph, that's me. And I know that because I was the only one loaded. I wasn't supposed to be. So yeah, that was my acting career.
Well, I see the name of Robert Duvall up there.
Yes, he played General Lee. And it's called Gods and Generals, and that was the second movie. Gettysburg was first, and then they did Gods and Generals, which was actually a prequel to Coming Up to Gettysburg. All right, here is one that I've known for a long time. This is historic Pointer Rocks. I started talking with the landowners, which were three sisters in 2006. Their mother had passed away, Elizabeth Cox, and I had known her for quite a few years, sitting on her porch talking about the site. And so one of her wishes was to hope that the Pointer Rocks site would be saved as a historical site in Chesterfield County. So talking with the daughters, we were able to agree on a price finally. We applied for a grant from the American Battlefield Protection Program. The county put a match in, and then the owner put a partial donation in. So when we got the grant, it paid for the site, and it's 30 acres with the 1841 historic house on the property, which is being restored right now. This is a photograph of what the hospital site looked like. It was a Union hospital that could hold over 5,000 men during the war. Notice, no county taxpayer dollars. So anybody that lives in Chesterfield, the money that came from your pockets did not go in. What it came from was the hotel tax for revenue for tourism. So the part was some people who actually go to the hotels and pay that hotel tax, where's the money came from to acquire that property. Now, I don't know if I have it, but anyway, the property next door, I want to go to there, was owned by another woman in North Carolina, and the county just recently, you heard about this new water project they had in Chesterfield County to draw water out of Appomattox and build a new water treatment plant. They needed a site on that property of 2 acres to build a pumping station. Well, she has 30 acres. And the county, I'm now retired, and the county calls me, do you know this lady? And I said, oh, I know her well. She says, well, we're having problems getting a hold of her. Can you contact her for us? And I ended up talking with her, and they made an offer to her, and the offer wasn't enough, and I agreed with that. I told her that. I was her advisor. I said, let them raise the price up to the assessed value. I said, but let's put a condition on it that once utilities finishes their pumping station, the rest of that 30 acres, which one would be now 28 acres, would go to add to the park at the Pointer Rocks. So the park will eventually, at some point in the future, be a 60-acre park. It's open to the public now on a appointment-only basis. We're trying to get it somewhere short in the next few years to get it open all the time. Now, in order to save this house, we had a lot of hoops to jump through. The county did not want to spend that kind of money to buy this site. So I ended up in front of a military tribunal in the county courthouse, and I was told I had 3 options. I'm looking at the options and I'm going like, which one do I pick? And so the last thing was, they decided that if I could not find a photograph of that house in 1864-65, because their historical architecture book said it was built in 1871. So they were using printed document saying it's 1871. 2 days before Christmas, a friend of mine sent me 3,000 photographs, and I'm flashing through them real quick, and I had to back up real quick. The White House with the 2 chimneys is the house at Pointer Rocks. So Monday morning, you never saw somebody so, because I had proof now. So once they committed that, once I found a house, they would buy it. That's how it was saved. And there's a photograph of the house today. It's all the bushes around it are gone. The house has been repainted. The roof's been done. The floors have been repainted inside. It's got a air controlled interior now to protect it. The inside is not finished yet. But there's the happy day. The landowners on the left and county employee on the right signing the documents transferring the house to Chesterfield County. So that was really a really good deal. And in 2013, the house transferred to the county. Again, there was a three-way split on the acquiring the property. Now this part is called 39th Illinois Park. It's in the subdivision of Hopkins Road. It's where the Battle of Drury's Bluff took place. This is the extreme left end. Working with the developer, his engineer kept trying to narrow down. Notice how much street frontage we have today in there. They only wanted to give us just a little piece of it, just to kind of like walk in, and about an acre that was left. So we ended up, because we wouldn't give up. They had a meeting come in, and I got to make a presentation to the owner, and he looked at his engineer and said, give them what they want. So we actually got 3.5 acres, approximately, for the 39th Illinois Park. If anybody is familiar with Gettysburg and the Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine on the extreme left end there, these guys were the same way. They were hung out there on the far left and were being flanked by Confederate soldiers. And they dug earthworks the night before and were able to hold off a whole brigade of Confederate soldiers with just one regiment of Union soldiers, because those earthworks held them. Eventually, the Confederates enveloped them and they had to fall back. But again, they donated the site to the county. And there's one of our historical site markers on the property. These markers were raised through the Blue and Gray Education Society. We applied for a grant from them for $2,000. And it perked their interest, so two of the members of the board came down and saw what we wanted to do. They went back, made a presentation, and said, we will pay for all of your markers. How many do you need? And we said 43. So what happens is they take photographs of these plaques, like we have right here, and they get sponsorship. And they raised $20,000 in 2 weeks to pay for all those markers. So now we have 43 interpretive markers like this one around the county. All right, let's see where I'm at now. I lost. Oh, this is Parker's Battery. And this is one of the things that started helping me get involved in preservation, because it was there. And we also tried to work with the landowner for the Ware Bottom Church site. There are 90 graves on that property. It's not watched very well. There were like 1 foot square stone concrete squares that marked all the 90 graves on the property, and people keep going over there and stealing them. So, technically they don't know that it's privately owned land. Well, they know that, but they're taking the markers because there's no trespassing signs or whatever. So eventually the landowner donated the property to the Richmond Battlefield Association, and they own it. And hopefully next month I will be on their board, and we're going to start doing something to interpret this site. So, all right. One of the first parks that I saved we had was Howlett Line Park, which is a little square. And then later we came back and worked with the American Battlefield Trust, which was a Civil War trust back then. And we made some efforts and were able to acquire the 11 acres, which has more Confederate earthworks on it. And we were able to get that through a Civil War trust donation to the county. So that park is now 13 acres. Now we're back at Battery Dancer, and when this site was saved in 1985, the triangular piece, little flag piece, I was talking with Mr. Goen. He was there at the dedication, and I said, would you be interested in selling us the rest of the battery? And he says, well, not at this time, let me think about it. So 20-something years later, he finally thought about it, actually 30 years, and we worked out a deal and got a Dominion Power grant actually wasn't a grant, it was a donation, to purchase that because they were building an ash pit site on another Civil War site, an Indian site, so we were given like $80,000 to help purchase this property. And the owner donation and the American Battlefield Protection Grant. So now that park is a little bit over 15 acres. Then we had coming up the 150th of the Civil War. The county had allocated money for improvements at the county Civil War parks. So that money was used to develop trails, parking lots, and new historic signs at entrances to these parks. So they kind of conform with all the other county parks in the county. So that project was about $150,000 that they allocated, and the parks were improved at that point. This is an interesting park. Fort Drake, it's not a park. It's now what I'm doing projects in the future. This project in the future is very difficult because Route 10 goes right through the middle of that fort, where they widened it now. So you have the two ends on both sides, but they didn't get damaged because in negotiations, they would have had to have purchased alternate land to destroy those and purchase land for other Civil War sites in the county. County did not want to spend the money for that. So if you go down Route 10 today, it's 8 lanes wide, and then it kind of narrows down like this, and then it's got an hourglass shape just west of Meadowville Road and Old Bermuda 100 Road. So you'll notice that when you go down, it narrows and then widens back out. And that kept them from avoiding from having to damage the site. And there it is. This is what's left. The yellow is still existing. That's gone up here now, but the fort has been widened. And the interesting thing there was on June 22nd, 1864, and March 25th of 1865, Abraham Lincoln first visited that site. It's been confirmed that he was there on June 22nd. Assuming when he did his tour again, that he had to go by it in his tour to Point of Rocks. So President Lincoln visited Chesterfield County twice. This is one of the sites that we had projected it was important to save. You can see the earthworks running through these big tracks. They are now gone because the county approved a warehouse site on that property, and they're leveling all the earthworks around the outside of Dory's Bluff. So they couldn't be saved. This is Battery Brook. If you remember when the Chinese came in and said they were going to build that paper mill plant over in Chesterfield County, well, this property is where that plant was supposed to go. We put conditions on it when they started their planning. They had it allocated to save the earthworks of Battery Brook because there's resource protection areas and other issues, RPAs and things like that that protect it. But then the plant fell through, and so the land right now is still temporarily saved. The site is. This is Fort McConaughey. It's out there in Bermuda 100. It's just south of Old Bermuda 100 Road and along Ramblewood Drive. This is one of the sites we're keeping an eye on that the landowner, when he bought it as an investment, and then in 2008, the bottom fell out of the land values. And so he owned more than the property was worth at that time, so it's been sitting there dormant. But you can see there was a photograph taken of it, and it was an outer fort on the Bermuda 100 lines for the Union Army. Now we're back to Warebottom Church. The original park is over here with the earthworks. Over the years, we have negotiated and agreed, and the county now owns the large portion of the site. It's an additional 50 acres to the Weston Church Park. The smaller piece, little flag-looking piece, we're in negotiations with the landowner now to close the deal to add that to the park, so we'll have a 65-acre park when that's done, and we're going to add like about a couple miles of trails through there, interpreting things on that property. So that was another win-win. People don't know it. When you go to the Chesterfield Motor Mile off of Fort Walthall Junction, the battle was fought there. The bridge over 95 was the center of the battlefield. So this is a long lost, not quite lost battlefield. We've been looking at these parcels here. They're on the, when you get off the exit ramp going north at the Woods Edge Road, these are on the right-hand side, the trees you would see right there on the right-hand side of the road. And when you pull into the car dealerships, that's kind of like where it's lined up, where that exists today. I think I've got another slide. But that little triangle of woods along the exit ramp, and it goes around when you go in the parking lot on the right, that's the land we're looking at trying to save. This site is where the Second Battle of Fort Walthall Junction took place. Over 8,000 men were involved in this engagement here. Haven't been able to get through the ownership. We know who owns it, but we can't get through their door. We're still trying. It's important. It's on the most endangered list of Civil War battlefields significant that caused and affected the Civil War. In 1993, there was a study done. It took 10,000 engagements and narrowed it down to 381 across the country. That was most significant for cause and effect the impact of the war. Weston Church, both battlefields qualify. Swift Creek qualifies. Jerry's Bluff qualifies. Bermuda 100 qualifies. We actually have 5 designated historic sites in Chesterfield County that are qualifying for federal money, the matching money I was talking about from the American Battlefield Protection Program. This is one of the sites we'd like to save. So here we go, 1985. This is what, ignore the green dots, that was another thing I couldn't get off the screen. The 4 parks that existed in 1985. Since that time, if you want to take a Bermuda 100 campaign tour today, you have 29 sites, not all county owned, not some privately owned, but you can notice the dots through the county. Those are county parks. There are 9 county Civil War parks today, with additional properties added to them since 1985. And that's through my efforts and a lot of other people as I got people backing me and helping support this conservation efforts. So it's an amazing change in 35 years. So, taking a dramatic look at if you build it, will they come? Has all the preservation work been required? Yes, it's been worth it and been very fulfilling. This family's from Illinois. That group is from all over the country. That family over there and us over here is from Washington State. Another tour group came through. Historic homes and whatever. People are touring the county and touring these sites, and people never notice them. The county priority is sports tourism. They do not push historic tourism. They don't think there's any money in it. But there are hundreds of people every year come to Chesterfield County and ask me for tours, go out on their own with our guidebooks, and follow the Bermuda 100 campaign today. So it's not, I would say it's been very worth it to be able to see that happen. Right, there we go. Thank you for my presentation, and are there any questions?